What's up, everybody? So we're out in the shop, and in this video we are going to work on the bevels and heat treat process of the Mokume Kumai knife build. That is a very long name, but it's awesome. So now today's focus is going to be the initial bevel, which is going to be grinding the bevels a little bit, and then we're going to heat treat it. And then after we're done with the heat treat and temper, we're going to go ahead and finish grinding all the bevels. Primarily because I want it to be a little bit thick going into the heat treat, because we're primarily just focusing on heat treating the cutting edge. So I'm not going to be doing a full quench. I'm just going to be doing basically an edge quench like you would do if you were going to be, trying to create a hamon on a knife. That is the goal here, and we're going to see how it goes. But once we get done with, like I said, the heat treat and temper, we're going to go ahead and finish grinding the bevels and everything the rest of the way. Now, one of the things to look forward on this is the next video as well, because on the next video we're going to be working on the handle scales for this knife, and that is going to be a pretty cool, unique video in itself, because we are doing some stuff on there that is going to be just pushing this unique build to an even more unique type of build. So y'all be on the lookout for that. Also, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell so you get notified of all the stuff we have that's coming up. This build is something that I'm really proud of, and I've got more and more stuff to come this year, so be on the lookout for that. But without further ado, let's jump into this and let's get this thing knocked out. So I decided to use the angle grinder to cut all the excess off on here instead of my porta bandsaw. But I know that some people are going to question this, and yes, I do have a guard for this angle grinder. I just did not put it on this one. I've been trying to focus on that, but didn't have it on here. I am grinding this back to pretty close to that line, and then I'll end up shaping it, doing the final shaping on the 2x72. And what I'm using here is my 2x72 with the 8-inch contact wheel and my work rest. And this is a 36 grit belt that's on here. And really we're just trying to get back to where we want it to be. I have the lines on there as a reference, but a lot of the times I modify it slightly and shape it a little bit different depending on how it feels in my hand. So the cool thing about this particular setup right here is I technically already have a center line because of the layer of 15 and 20 that runs down the center. All I'm going to do is use my calipers to just make sure that that is centered all the way to the edge. And it is, so all I've got to do is just grind. Let's see if I can get a better angle here. Just grind to that center line right there, and that's going to be my center. So this is actually pretty simple. I typically have to mark this with something like a Sharpie right here, and then I would have to go through and then mark the edge or scribe it somehow. But on this, I do not have to do that because we already have a center line. So all I got to do is just grind down to that line and call that done. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is get my plunge line jig put on there so we can start grinding in our first little set of bevels on here. We're going to go ahead and grind this at about a 45-degree angle, and I'm going to go a little bit different than that on this one, because what I typically do is I just grind a pretty aggressive angle to the center line so that I can then feather the bevels back from that. But the point behind grinding to that line is it sets your cutting edge right off the bat, and then you can just follow that. But I will be grinding this up just a little bit higher than this right here for the actual heat treat process. It's my first time using this little Coleman stove to heat my oil, and it worked real well for something that only cost $19. And by the time I actually quench this, it will be right at 120 degrees. But that's what we're trying to get our oil up to. And even though this looks a lot hotter than it is, that is kind of, it's playing tricks with your eyes because my shop is pretty dark. But we heated it up and went ahead and quenched it. Didn't have a huge flare up or anything, and we're just quenching the blade, and that's it. And this thing is absolutely ridiculously hard, so I'm surprised. I knew it was going to get pretty hard, but it skated a file. I thought it was going to start filing the file. I mean, it's pretty hard. And we're going to go ahead and temper this for an hour and a half at 400 degrees. Now it's time to go ahead and start bringing those bevels up. I left it a little bit thick during the heat treat process because I didn't want to have any warping issues. So now we've got to take the time to grind everything off. And yes, this was very time consuming because of the amount of layers of hardened steel that we have in there. But we're just going to bring those bevels up to the area that we're going to be bringing the false edge up to. And on that 36 grit, all I did was about 85% of the bevel. And then on this 120 grit, we're going to bring it up just a little bit more and try and get rid of some of those grind lines while bringing the bevels up just a little higher. And this will start refining the bevels a little bit, making sure we got any of the little bit of waves or anything like that out of them so that we have nice, smooth bevels and crisp lines. I will tell you, this copper grabs everything. Drill bits, belts, everything. It's a very, very sticky material, and it grabs everything that you're working with. Now, what we're doing here is we're grinding in that false edge going across the top, and I'm doing this a little bit different than I planned on with the template, because I want you to have a thumb rest on this little false edge that we have here. So I'm leaving the area flat where that thumb rest is. You'll see that at the end of the video. Now we're going to go ahead and use our Scotch Brite belt. I will tell you the trick to having crisp lines and using a Scotch Brite belt is make sure that your belt has a lot of tension on it and that you're using fresh belts. Now, when it comes to hand sanding this, I did take this all the way up to a 2000 grit sandpaper. I'm showing y'all the 220 and 320. So on this, the primary bevels, we're using 220 on this, and then whenever I show you the sanding of the other bevel right here, this is 320 grit, but I did go to 500 grit, 600 grit, 800 grit, and 1000 and 2000 to get where we wanted it to be. And I'll tell you, even with that, you still see some of the sanding lines because of this material. But we get a cool buff when it's all said and done. When it comes to the buffing, we're using a green compound on a fine wheel, and we're just getting after it. I will tell you, you want to be careful whenever you're, using something at a high RPM like this buffing pad and something that has a very sharp tip, because this can catch this blade and throw it back at you, and that'd be a bad day in the shop. This bad boy buffed real nice and everything stands out. Alright guys, let's go ahead and wrap this up, and I am super interested in seeing what y'all think about this build. Now, this is what we're working with. I mean, how sweet looking is that? I love that our Mokame Gane area rolls all the way into the ricasso. You can see where the layers just work their way in to the areas that we drilled into it, where everything just flows up into the ricasso area. I am super happy with that. We got a nice defined edge right here, all the way on both sides. I'm super happy with this. Now, is this your typical like Mokame Gane that you would do? Probably not. A lot of people do really high layer Mokame Gane. I wanted a lower layer because the overall amount of layers on this, there's 13 of them, but I wanted everything to kind of stand out and be a little bit on the larger scale, so all of the pieces to be a little bit larger. Whenever you do a really high count on something like this, there wouldn't be a bunch of contrast because you would have a whole bunch of little bitty polished lines and polished copper. So if I was going to do something that I was going to etch, that would be perfect for a high layer count because all those black lines would have stood out against this. But because I'm leaving everything nice and polished like this, I want it to be more dramatic, so I needed to have these bigger mirrored areas right there to make all that stand out. But I'm super happy with this build. Hopefully y'all are super stoked on it. Now, one of the things that we are going to be doing next is we're going to go ahead and make the handle scales and put them on here. Now, the scales are going to be made out of G10 and copper, so it's going to be a pretty cool scale setup, and I think that it's really going to match this. We're going to use copper pins. Everything is just going to be super cool when it's all said and done. I'm excited about it. Guys, if y'all would, give this video a thumbs up or share this video or one of my other videos. And guys, again, if you haven't yet, subscribe to the channel. Turn on the notification bell so you get notified of all the extra stuff we're doing with this knife. And again, go in the comment section. Tell me what y'all think about that. Guys, y'all have an amazing day. Y'all stay safe out there, and I will catch y'all next time.